but because reaction is submission disguised as righteousness. The moment you respond emotionally, you tell the attacker they've succeeded. You confirm that the words they used pierced your armor. You validate their attempt to pull you into their frame. Machiavelli understood what most people never will. Insults aren't just about disrespect. They're strategic probes, invitations, pressure tests. When someone insults you, they are not asking for truth. They're testing your leash. How tightly are you tied to your image? How badly do you want to be liked, validated, understood? They want to know how quickly they can make you dance. Most people fall right into it, believing they're defending their honor, when in fact, they're just advertising where it hurts. And once you've done that, the attacker doesn't just win the moment. They gain the coordinates to your psychological weak spots. Now they know how to provoke you again. And worse, everyone else knows too. So what did Machiavelli do? He didn't apologize. He didn't argue. He didn't retaliate. He restructured the power dynamic. Because the real game isn't about who wins the insult. It's about who refuses to play. The moment you act like it's beneath you to even respond, the tables flip. The attacker looks small, not you. This isn't just theory. This is psychological architecture. An insult isn't mere speech. It's a frame trap. It's designed to force a predictable reaction. Defend yourself and prove their words matter. Strike back and confirm you're emotional. Laugh along and expose your need to belong. But there's a fourth move, the one Machiavelli preferred. Cold, quiet, surgical. He didn't react. He reframed. He made the room recalibrate without saying a single word. Because once you control the frame, you control the room. He understood the silent arts, stillness as menace, eye contact as pressure. When someone insulted him, he didn't flinch. He didn't chuckle to play it off. He watched them, calm, focused, calculating. And in that eerie stillness, the room would change. Because no one fears the man who explodes, but everyone fears the one who just stands there and says nothing. That's presence. That's control. And once people see that you've heard the insult, absorbed it, and remained unmoved, that you've seen this play before and already decided how it ends, they stop watching the attacker. They start watching you. The power shifts, not because you grabbed it, but because you refused to chase it. And Machiavelli didn't just end insults. Sometimes he invited them. Strategically. Not because he liked disrespect, but because insults are shortcuts to truth. He would create tension, just enough to see who would break, who would try to dominate with words, who would reveal insecurity disguised as confidence. The moment they insulted, they exposed themselves. Not you. You want to dismantle a person with high status? Let them insult you in front of others. Say nothing, just watch. Let the room hold its breath and walk away. Because now, the silence sticks to them. Now they're left holding a grenade that didn't explode, and the audience sees it for what it is. A failed flex, a desperate grab at dominance that crumbled before it even landed. That's why Machiavelli didn't need revenge. He needed witnesses, because he understood that insult is theater, and the crowd always remembers the moment someone embarrassed themselves by trying too hard. When you stay still, they look excessive. When you don't flinch, they look insecure. And when you remain untouched, they look like they missed. Insults only matter when they strike something unhealed. Call a strong man weak and he laughs. Call a secure man fake and he shrugs. But call an unsure man by the thing he fears most, and he will erupt. And that eruption is the proof. But if you've made peace with your shadows, if you've embraced your past, mastered your flaws, turned them into armor, then no insult lands. It returns to the sender like a boomerang with no target. That's the true Machiavellian advantage, total self-possession. A level of inner clarity so sharp that nothing external can pierce it. But it goes deeper. Machiavelli didn't just neutralize insults, he learned from them. He decoded them. Because every insult is intelligence. When someone mocks your ambition, they're revealing their laziness. When they question your character, they're projecting their own instability. When they accuse you of arrogance, it's because they've already compared themselves to you and lost. Insults reveal motive, envy, weakness, fear. Most people hear an insult and only feel pain. But Machiavelli listened for leverage. He studied the attacker, saw through the facade, mapped out the fracture. And now he knew where to apply pressure, quietly, later, at the perfect moment. Sometimes, though, an insult does catch you off guard. It's loud, it's public, and for a moment your face tightens. You feel that instinct to respond. But Machiavelli had a rule for that too. You don't recover. You don't fix it. You let it hang in the air, raw and untouched. You look at the attacker like they're barking out of fear, not dominance. No words, no emotion, just blank, collected awareness. Let the discomfort land on them. Let the room shift its gaze, because now the tension isn't about what was said. It's about how you absorbed it. And when you don't break, the crowd wonders, what kind of man doesn't flinch? What kind of man takes a hit like that and doesn't blink? That's when you reclaim the frame, not through volume but through stillness. Because everyone came for drama, but the absence of drama becomes the show. Yet sometimes silence isn't the final word. Sometimes Machiavelli would respond, but never with emotion, never with volume, just one surgical sentence, sharp, unmistakable, final, not a debate, but a verdict. They say you're fake? You'd know. They call you arrogant? Confidence looks strange to the unsure. They call you too much? I don't shrink to soothe the fragile. Then silence. That's not a comeback. That's an incision. A line so precise it ends the scene. Because Machiavelli didn't do clashes. He did cuts. Clean, cold, irreversible. Clashes create chaos. Cuts create memory. Cuts create pause. And people remember the pause. They remember what wasn't said. And they wonder what else you could have said, but didn't. That's the art. You don't play the insult game. You dismantle it. You change the terrain. You force the world to view insults not as threats, but as confessions. Because that's what they really are. And Machiavelli didn't aim to win arguments. He aimed to become immune. He wanted the attacker to feel the hollowness of their attempt, the emptiness of their blow, the futility of trying to rattle a man who's already resolved within himself. You don't gain power by overpowering. You gain power by showing that power no longer has to be proven. And once people realize that no insult works on you, they stop trying, not out of kindness, but out of fear. Because now they're unsure of what you're truly capable of. If you ever decided to speak, they start to wonder, what kind of storm is a man containing when he responds to nothing? What does he know? What does he see that allows him to absorb fire without flinching? That's not just control. That's intimidation through discipline. Because in every insult, there is a bet being placed. The attacker is gambling on your insecurity, hoping to provoke a performance. But Machiavelli flipped that dynamic. He made the attacker the performer. He let them stumble through their own act, unreciprocated, unsupported, publicly unraveling in the silence he curated. And here's the critical detail. Machiavelli never needed to explain himself. Because the moment you explain, you give legitimacy to the accusation. You validate the charge. You walk into the courtroom as the defendant instead of standing above the fray as the enigma. The second you feel compelled to clarify, to correct, to plead your case, you've already surrendered the high ground, because now your identity is in negotiation. And Machiavelli never negotiated identity. He projected it. That's what most people miss. Insults are not weapons, they are invitations. And once you step into that ring to spar, you've already lost your elevation. Machiavelli knew better. He understood that the strongest move isn't to strike back, it's to render the attack irrelevant. Because once your energy remains untouched, the insulter begins to doubt their own. Their weapon falls flat. Their words echo without landing. And worse, for them, everyone else sees it too. This is the reversal. Not through shouting, not through dominance, through poise. The kind of poise that turns an insult into a mirror. Now the insult reveals the attacker, not you. And what does it reveal? Insecurity, envy, fragility. The desperate need to dent something they can't dent. That's not aggression. That's panic dressed up as power. But Machiavelli played the game even deeper. He didn't just neutralize insults. He converted them. He used them as lenses. Because when someone insults you, especially publicly, they give you more than just their emotion. They give you a blueprint. You now see how they think, where they feel inferior, what they resent, what they fear. The insult is a map. It tells you where they want to attack, which usually means where they've already been defeated. When they mock your structure, it's because they live in chaos. When they belittle your ambition, it's because they drowned theirs. When they question your worth, it's because they haven't found their own. Machiavelli didn't flinch. He listened. He didn't get offended. He got informed. Because when someone speaks out of jealousy or discomfort, they can't help but reveal what hurts them. Most people get distracted by the sting. Machiavelli studied the source. And sometimes, yes, the insult does land. It catches you raw. You weren't prepared. It echoes in the room, and people turn to see your reaction. This is the crucible. This is the test. And Machiavelli's method was brutal in its simplicity. Don't rescue yourself. Don't fumble to clean it up. Freeze. Let the moment expand. Let the tension wrap around the room. Look at the attacker, not with hate, not with wounded pride, but like a man studying a pattern. No expression, no reply, just presence. That discomfort will not hang on you. It will hang on them. Because the spotlight doesn't stay on the one who was hit. It shifts to how they absorb the hit. And when you absorb it like you've seen it all before, the room gets quiet for a different reason. Now the fear isn't about what was said. It's about what you might do next. And when nothing comes, that's when your power becomes undeniable. But Machiavelli also understood something colder. Sometimes silence is not enough. Sometimes you respond, not to react, but to finalize. And when you do, the formula is always the same. Short, sharp, surgical. A sentence. No follow-up, no escalation, just clarity. They call you fake? You'd recognize it. They call you dangerous? Only to the weak. They call you manipulative? Control looks different from the outside. Then you stop. Let them choke on the silence. Because you didn't give them a fight. You gave them a conclusion. That's not a defense. That's a dismantling. And Machiavelli always preferred precision to spectacle. Because precision ends conversations, while spectacle drags them into chaos. When you speak like that, once, cleanly, you force your opponent into a corner. If they respond, they look flustered. If they stay quiet, they look defeated. Either way, you win. Not the argument, the frame. And the frame is what people remember. You don't need to win a room by force when you can shape its perception with restraint. But the most elite move, the redirection, let the insult come. Let the attacker puff their chest. And then, mid-tension, pivot back to your original point, as if nothing happened. You say, "Anyway, what I was saying," and continue. That pivot is surgical. It classifies the insult as so trivial, it's not even worth stopping for. And when you do that, you erase the attacker from the narrative entirely. They either spiral to regain attention, or they retreat in silence. Either way, you don't follow them. You stay in control of the current. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. The true goal wasn't to block the insult, it was to make the insult forgettable. And sometimes he went one step further, not just ignoring or reframing the insult, but owning it on his terms. This is strategic ownership. Someone calls you ruthless? I prefer precise. They call you cold? Warmth is earned. They call you manipulative. I've mastered outcomes. Now their insult becomes your reputation. Their attack becomes your origin story. What they meant to weaponize, you've repurposed. Now others don't see shame. They see someone unshakable, someone forged. And the attacker? They look like the fool who built your myth for you. This is where Machiavelli thrived, where insults weren't deflected, they were transformed, where mockery became magnetism. Because when a man owns everything about himself, his past, his flaws, his sharpness, there is no angle left to attack. And when others witness this, they stop siding with the insult and start admiring the resilience. Because it's no longer a question of whether the insult was true. It's a realization that, truth or not, you are unmovable. And that's the final evolution. Machiavelli didn't avoid insults. He welcomed them. Because every insult thrown at a high-value man is really an admission that the attacker sees him as a threat. No one mocks what they don't notice. No one lashes out at someone beneath them. They do it to feel taller. And that attempt alone is proof of the imbalance. So when it happens, don't think, "Why me?" Think, "Of course me." And because visibility always attracts fire. Weak men run from it. Average men try to extinguish it. But the Machiavellian lets it burn, because he knows the fire reveals who's fragile. And it never burns him. It only lights the room where he stands untouchable. There comes a moment, if you've played this right, where the crowd shifts, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. A silence so charged it becomes louder than any insult. A presence so grounded it reorganizes perception. And the one who insulted? They begin to shrink under the weight of their own performance. That's the reversal. Not through war, not through retaliation, but through stillness so stable, the world cannot shake it. Because here's the truth few are willing to admit. Insults only work on people still fighting for approval, on men still proving their worth. But once you realize you are not here to be accepted, not here to explain, not here to soothe fragile egos or play small for the comfort of others, everything changes. You stop flinching. You stop reacting. And that stillness becomes your sharpest weapon. Because an unreadable man is a dangerous man. And when you're unreadable, people start projecting their own fears onto you. They begin to doubt themselves in your presence, not because you did anything, but because you didn't need to. And that's the kind of dominance Machiavelli mastered. Not through action, through controlled inaction. Because the greatest power is presence. And when your presence remains composed while others flail, the entire room adjusts around you. But let's go even darker. When you become the kind of man who doesn't respond to insults, something strange happens. The attacks don't stop, they escalate, louder, sharper, more personal. Not because you're weak, but because your silence has become unbearable to those trying to control you. It triggers them. They feel invisible, powerless, ignored. so they push harder, hoping to provoke you into validating their relevance. But every time you don't, every time you let them scream into silence, you send them a brutal message. I don't need to prove anything, but you do. And that exposure is deadly, because now everyone watching sees the pattern. They see who's calm and who's desperate. They see which man owns the room, and which man is begging to be seen. This is what Machiavelli meant when he said a prince must learn to appear strong even in stillness. Not to intimidate, but to project stability so absolute that even the sharpest attacks disintegrate upon impact. You're not hiding from battle. You're simply too far ahead to be drawn into petty skirmishes. And yet, there are moments when silence must be paired with precision, not to defend, not to retaliate, but to fracture the attacker with elegance. This is the Machiavellian counter-insult. A strike so subtle, it doesn't even sound like war. No raised voice, no dramatic delivery, just surgical commentary designed to destabilize the ego that dared to provoke you. You always talk the loudest when you're unsure. That's revealing. I wouldn't have said that out loud. You must have needed to say that. These aren't comebacks. These are social dissections. You've taken the attention off yourself and redirected the spotlight onto them, under harsher, more unforgiving light. Now they're the spectacle, and the room watches them squirm. And the genius of it? You didn't defend. You didn't attack. You simply made them feel exposed by the very thing they thought would weaken you. That's not revenge. That's reputation engineering. You've built a fortress around yourself, not with words, but with restraint. But it doesn't stop there. Machiavelli played the long game. He never saw insults as isolated events. He saw them as signals. When someone insults you, even if the words don't land, they reveal intent. They show you who is threatened by you, who's watching you too closely, who's quietly trying to erode your influence in front of others. And that information is worth more than any comeback. So what did Machiavelli do with that intel? He didn't act immediately. He remembered. The timing, the tone, the motive, and later, when the moment benefited him, not them, he acted. Quietly. Surgically. He isolated the attacker subtly. He let them speak while planting quiet doubts in the minds of others. Not with accusations, but with questions. Is that how he always is? I didn't expect that from him. Strange energy, right? He never framed them as enemies. He let others come to that conclusion on their own. And eventually the insulter wasn't attacking anymore. They were explaining. They were clarifying. They were backtracking. Because they'd realized too late. The man they thought they could rattle was the one they never should have provoked. And that's the mastery. You don't punish them. You let the consequences of their own behavior unravel them slowly, publicly, without lifting a finger. Your restraint becomes a sentence. Your silence becomes a verdict. You want to dominate the insult dynamic? Memorize this. Never react when they expect rage. Never defend when they target your image. Never explain when they distort your words. Never joke when they test your strength. And never fight when silence will bury them deeper. Let the insult reveal them, not you. Let your stillness confuse them, not affirm them. Let your reputation grow not by defense, but by mystery. Because the man who flinches becomes the target. But the man who absorbs, who observes, who responds only when necessary and with exact precision, that man becomes the myth, the presence they fear but cannot figure out. That's how Machiavelli handled insults, not through force but through gravitational pull. His composure made others tremble. His silence said what words never could. And his understanding of human insecurity turned every attack into a case study, every insult into intelligence, every provocation into opportunity. He didn't silence his attackers. He made them irrelevant. Because once you no longer respond to insults, they're no longer attacks. They're confessions. Confessions of weakness. Confessions of envy. Confessions of fear. And when the world starts to see them that way, you've won more than the moment. You've won the entire dynamic. Machiavelli never set out to be liked. He set out to be unshakable. And that's what every man aiming for power must